Ambassador Kang Dae-ho walked slowly through the huge metal doors of the Galactic Council meeting hall. His black shoes made soft sounds on the smooth floor. He had walked through these same doors many times before, but today felt different. Today might be the last time. The meeting hall was bigger than any building on Earth. The ceiling went up so high that Dae-ho could not see the top. Thousands of seats filled the space, and in each seat sat a different alien being. Some looked like giant insects. Others looked like snakes with arms. Some glowed with their own light. Some were so strange that Dae-ho still did not understand how they worked after 70 years of meeting them. Behind Dae-ho walked 3 other humans. Dr. Yoon Hae-jin was a smart woman who studied alien bodies and how they worked. She had saved millions of alien lives with her medical knowledge. Captain Park Tae-min wore his military uniform with pride. He had fought in 12 different wars to protect alien worlds. Engineer Kim So-ra was quiet as always, but her mind held the secrets of how to build the machines that kept the galaxy running. They were the human delegation to the Galactic Council. For 73 years, humans had served the Council. They had shared their technology. They had fought in wars that were not their own. They had died to protect alien worlds. They had given everything, and in return, they asked for only one thing: to be treated as equals. The High Chancellor of the Vrex was speaking. His body looked like a huge snake, but with 4 arms and 4 eyes. His voice was deep and cold. The request from the humans for full membership in the Council is denied, he said. Again. This was the 15th time humans had asked to become full members of the Council. Each time they were told no. Each time they were given a different reason. Sometimes they were told they were too young as a species. Sometimes they were told they were too violent. Sometimes they were told they did not understand how the galaxy worked. Your species lacks the wisdom needed for true leadership, the Chancellor continued. His 4 eyes looked down at Dae-ho with disgust. Perhaps, in another 100 years, when you have learned proper manners, we will consider your request again. The other aliens in the hall made sounds of agreement. The Zephyrian delegate, who looked like a tall bird with silver feathers, spoke next. Humans are too direct in their speech. They do not understand the art of careful words. This makes them dangerous in important meetings. Dae-ho felt anger rise in his chest, but he kept his face calm. He had been a diplomat for 40 years. He knew how to control his emotions. Behind him, he could feel the anger of his team as well. Dr. Yoon Hae-jin had spent 30 years creating new medicines that had saved entire species from disease. Captain Park Tae-min had lost half his soldiers protecting alien colonies from pirates and invaders. Engineer Kim So-ra had built the power systems that kept Council space stations working. None of that seemed to matter to the aliens in this hall. What the aliens did not know was that every word they spoke was being recorded. For 70 years, humans had been keeping careful records. They wrote down every insult, every rejection, every time their sacrifices were forgotten. Dr. Lee Chan-ho, back on Earth, had spent decades studying every alien species in the Council. He knew their weaknesses. He knew what they needed to survive. He knew secrets that would shock the entire galaxy. The Krathan representative, a being that looked like a giant ant, clicked his mandibles together. Humans think they can solve every problem with violence or simple solutions. The galaxy needs careful thought, not human rashness. Dae-ho almost laughed. The Krathan had called for human help just 6 months ago when their world was attacked by space pirates. Human soldiers had died to save Krathan eggs from being destroyed. Now the same Krathan called humans violent and rash. The meeting continued for 2 hours. One by one, different alien species stood up to speak against humanity. They listed reasons why humans were not good enough to join their council as equals. Some reasons were old complaints. Some were new insults. All of them hurt. The Quilarian delegate, whose people looked like living crystals, spoke in a voice like breaking glass. Humans are too emotional. They cannot make the cold, logical decisions that leadership requires. The Morthak representative, a creature covered in thick fur with 6 legs, growled his words. Human technology is crude compared to our advanced systems. They would slow down our progress. Each word was another slap in Dae-ho's face. These same aliens had begged for human help countless times. Human doctors had cured their diseases. Human engineers had fixed their broken machines. Human soldiers had died in their wars. Human diplomats had solved their conflicts. But none of that was remembered now. Finally, the High Chancellor raised one of his 4 arms for silence. The decision of the Council is final. Humanity will remain an associate member only. You may continue to serve the Council in your current role, but you will not be given voting rights or leadership positions. Deho stood up slowly. He looked around the huge hall at thousands of alien faces. Most looked smug and satisfied. Some looked bored, as if this decision meant nothing to them. A few looked uncomfortable, but none spoke up for humanity. Very well, Deho said. His voice was calm and steady. If humanity is not worthy of membership in the Galactic Council, then humanity withdraws all support from the Galactic Council. This withdrawal begins immediately. The hall went silent. For a moment, no one moved or spoke. Then confused sounds began to fill the air. Aliens turned to each other, asking what the human ambassador had just said. Some laughed, thinking it was a joke. Others looked worried. The High Chancellor's 4 eyes narrowed. You cannot be serious. One species cannot threaten the entire galaxy. Deho smiled for the first time that day. It was not a happy smile. We are not threatening anyone, Chancellor. We are simply leaving. If we are not good enough to be your equals, then we are not good enough to be your servants either. He turned and walked toward the door. Dr. Yoon Hae-jin, Captain Park Tae-min, and Engineer Kim So-ra followed him. Their footsteps echoed in the suddenly quiet hall. Behind them, the aliens began to panic. Admiral Cho Min-soo was drinking coffee on the bridge of his ship when the message arrived. The ship was called Soul's Pride, and it was the biggest warship in the human defense fleet. Around him, his crew worked quietly at their stations, monitoring space traffic and watching for trouble. The communication officer looked up from her screen. Admiral, we have a priority message from Earth Command. It's coded as Operation Homecoming. Min-soo set down his coffee cup. He had been waiting for this message for months, though he hoped it would never come. Put it through to my private screen. The message was short and simple. All human personnel and assets are to withdraw from Council space immediately. No exceptions. Begin Operation Homecoming now. Min-soo closed his eyes for a moment, then he opened the ship's communication system. This is Admiral Cho Min-soo to all ships of the Human Defense Fleet. Execute Operation Homecoming. I repeat, execute Operation Homecoming immediately. Across the galaxy, human ships began to move. The defense fleet had been spread across dozens of star systems, keeping peace and protecting trade routes. Now they all turned toward home. Pirates who had been held back by the fear of human patrol ships suddenly found empty space where their enemies used to be. On the medical station orbiting Vex Prime, Dr. Yoon Hae-jin was packing her research. For 30 years, she had worked to understand alien biology. She had created medicines that saved millions of lives. Her databases contained information about every known disease in the galaxy and how to cure them. Her assistant, a young Vrex doctor named Sithara, watched her with confusion. Dr. Yoon, where are you going? The Council still needs your work. Hae-jin looked at the alien doctor with sad eyes. The Council has made it clear that humans are not welcome as equals. So we are leaving. She pressed a button on her computer. I am taking all human medical research with me. The computer screens around the medical station began to go dark. 70 years of human medical knowledge disappeared from the galactic databases. Treatment plans for alien diseases vanished. Surgical techniques that had saved countless lives were gone. The medical system that kept billions of aliens healthy began to fall apart. Sithara stared at the empty screens in shock. But, you cannot take this knowledge. These medicines save lives. Then perhaps the Council should have valued the people who created them, Hae-jin said quietly. She picked up her bags and walked to the shuttle bay. On the industrial world of Korvax 7, Engineer Kim So-ra was shutting down the fusion reactor that powered the entire planet. The reactor was a human design, built with human technology that the aliens did not fully understand. They knew how to use it, but not how to fix it or build new ones. The Korvaxian plant manager, a being that looked like a walking tree, was begging her to stay. "Engineer Kim, you cannot leave now. The reactor needs maintenance next month. Without power, our factories will stop working. Millions of people will lose their jobs." Sora did not stop working. Her hands moved across the control panels, initiating shutdown procedures that would take hours to complete. "You should have thought about that before you decided humans were not good enough to sit at your council table. But this is different. This is about survival." Sora finally looked at the plant manager. Her face was cold and angry. "Yes, it is about survival. And the council decided that human survival was not important enough to grant us equal treatment." Similar scenes were happening across the galaxy. Human engineers were shutting down power plants, communication networks, and transportation systems. The aliens had become so dependent on human technology that they had forgotten how their own machines worked. Captain Park Taman was leading the withdrawal of human military forces from the border world of Threshka. His soldiers were loading their equipment onto transport ships while alien civilians watched in fear. The local Threshkan governor, a tall being with purple skin and 3 eyes, approached him desperately. "Captain Park, you cannot leave. The Marauder pirates have been planning an attack on our world for months. Only your fleet keeps them away." Tamin continued supervising the loading of military vehicles onto his transport ships. "Then I suggest you contact the Council Defense Force for protection. The Council Defense Force is spread too thin. They cannot get here in time if the pirates attack." "That sounds like a council problem, not a human problem," Taman replied. "We offered to be full members of the council so we could help make these decisions. The council said no, so now the council can solve its own problems." The governor's 3 eyes filled with tears. "But innocent people will die." Taman stopped working and looked at the governor. For a moment, his hard expression softened. "Innocent people have been dying in council wars for 70 years. Human people, young soldiers who died protecting alien worlds that would not even let them vote on council decisions. I am sorry for what might happen to your people, but I am not sorry for bringing my soldiers home." The most unexpected withdrawal came from Bang Kyung-soo, who owned a chain of restaurants across council space. His restaurant served human food to aliens who had developed a taste for Earth cuisine. But more importantly, they had become meeting places where diplomats from different species came to talk and make deals. Kyung-soo was closing his restaurant on the capital station when the Zephyrian trade minister arrived. The tall, bird-like alien was one of his regular customers. "Kyung-soo, you cannot close now. The trade negotiations with the Morthak delegation are happening here tomorrow." Kyung-soo continued packing dishes and cooking equipment. "Then you will have to find somewhere else to meet. But your restaurant is neutral ground. Both species trust you to provide a safe place for talks. The council has decided that humans cannot be trusted with important decisions," Kyung-soo said. "So humans will no longer provide safe places for council business." The trade minister looked around the empty restaurant in panic. These informal meetings were how most council business actually got done. Without neutral places to meet, many negotiations would simply stop happening. By the end of the first day, the effects were already being felt across the galaxy. Ships were stranded without human-maintained jump gates. Factories were shutting down without human-designed power systems. Hospitals were running out of medicines that only human doctors knew how to make. The Council Emergency Communication System, which humans had built and maintained, began to fail as human technicians packed their equipment and left. Alien worlds found themselves unable to call for help when problems started. On 17 different border worlds, pirate attacks began within hours of the human fleet withdrawal. The pirates had been waiting for exactly this moment. Without human patrol ships to stop them, they moved freely through space, raiding and destroying. Trade routes that had been protected by human merchants and warships became dangerous passages that alien ships feared to travel. The galactic economy, which had grown fat and comfortable under human protection, began to collapse as goods stopped moving between worlds. Admiral Min-soo watched all of this from his ship as the human fleet headed toward Earth. He felt no joy in what was happening, but he felt no regret either. For 70 years, humans had given everything to help build and protect galactic civilization. They had asked for nothing in return except to be treated with respect and equality. The Council had chosen to refuse that simple request. Now they would learn what their arrogance truly cost. The Soul's pride crossed into human space, followed by hundreds of other ships carrying soldiers, workers, and civilians home. Behind them, the galaxy burned. The Galactic Council emergency meeting was a disaster from the moment it began. High Chancellor Vextar slammed his scaled fist on the speaking platform as the lights in the Great Hall flickered and went dim. The human technicians who had maintained the power systems were gone, and no one else knew how to fix the problems that were starting to appear. "This is madness," the Chancellor shouted, his 4 eyes blazing with anger. "One single species cannot hold the entire galaxy hostage." In the observer section, Dr. Nam Jun-ho sat quietly and watched everything unfold. He was the only human left on the council station, but not by accident. Jun-ho was a historian, and his job was to record what happened when the galaxy learned to survive without humanity. He had volunteered to stay behind so that future generations would have a complete record of these events. The Zephyrian Trade Minister's silver feathers were trembling as she spoke. "Our shipping networks have completely collapsed. Human cargo. Fleets handled more than half of all trade between star systems. Our merchants are too afraid to travel the routes without human protection. 3 of our major trade worlds have already declared bankruptcy." Junho wrote notes on his tablet while the aliens argued and panicked around him. He had expected this reaction, but seeing it happen was still fascinating in a terrible way. The Krathan representative clicked his mandibles together in distress. His insect-like face could not show emotion the way human faces could, but his body language screamed panic. "The medical crisis on Krathan Prime grows worse every hour. 3 million of our larvae are dying from the wasting sickness. We need human doctors and human medicines immediately." "The humans created those medicines," snapped the Morthak delegate, his fur standing up in anger. "They have no right to take them away from us." Junho looked up from his notes. "Actually, they have every right. Humans developed those treatments using their own resources and knowledge. The Council never paid for the research or contributed to the development. You simply took what humans freely gave." The aliens turned to stare at him. For a moment, the hall was silent, except for the buzzing of failing electrical systems. The Chancellor's voice was dangerous and low. "You dare to defend this betrayal?" "I am not defending anything," Junho replied calmly. "I am simply stating facts. Facts that the Council chose to ignore for 70 years. The Quillarian delegate, whose crystal body was normally bright blue, had faded to a dull gray color. This was how his species showed fear. Our communication networks are failing across 12 systems. We cannot coordinate our government without the quantum relay stations that humans built. Chief Administrator Wan Sung-min had been in charge of the Council's bureaucracy for 15 years. Before he left with the other humans, he had quietly transferred all administrative records to Earth's computers. Now the aliens were discovering that they could not even send messages between their own departments. The Vrex military commander stood up, his serpentine body coiling in agitation. "Our fleet reports that 40% of our weapon systems are offline. The targeting computers and shield generators use human-designed components that we do not know how to repair." This was the first time anyone had admitted how much they depended on human technology for their most basic needs. For decades, the aliens had pretended that human contributions were minor and easily replaceable. Now the truth was coming out. New voice spoke from the back of the hall. It was Ambassador Theclon from the Hegemony of 7 Suns, a group of small worlds that had always been neutral in council politics. "Perhaps we should ask ourselves why one species was so important to our civilization that losing them causes this much damage." The Chancellor turned his 4 eyes on Theclon. "What are you suggesting?" "I am suggesting that we made a mistake. A very big mistake." Theclon's people looked like tall, thin humans with pale green skin. "My worlds have been reviewing our records since the humans left. Do you know what we found?" No one answered, but Junho stopped writing and paid close attention. Human engineers designed the life support systems on 60% of our space stations. Human doctors created the vaccines that stopped the Red Death Plague 20 years ago. Human soldiers ended the Morthac-Zephyrian War before it destroyed both species. Human diplomats have mediated 437 conflicts in the past 70 years. The hall fell silent as the numbers sank in. Theclon continued speaking, his voice getting stronger. Human farmers taught us how to grow food on desert worlds. Human teachers shared knowledge that advanced our sciences by centuries. Human artists and musicians brought beauty to our cultures. And human workers built the machines that keep our civilization running. The Krathan representatives' clicking grew more frantic. But they never asked for payment. They gave us all of this freely. Yes, they did, Theclon agreed. They asked for only one thing in return: respect, equality. A voice in the decisions that affected the galaxy they helped build and protect. And we refused to give them even that. Junho made a note about this speech. Theclon was one of the few aliens who truly understood what had happened. The emergency session continued for 8 hours, but no solutions emerged. How could they solve problems when the people who understood the solutions were gone? How could they maintain systems when only humans knew how those systems worked? Worse news kept arriving throughout the day. 17 small species had declared independence from the Council, saying they would make their own agreements with humanity. The Outer Rim colonies were reporting attacks by pirates and raiders who had been held back by fear of human retaliation. 3 trade wars had started between species that used to settle their differences through human mediation. The Morthac delegate stood up suddenly, his 6 legs carrying his furry bulk toward the exit. This is useless. We are wasting time arguing while our worlds burn. I am returning to Morthac space to prepare for direct negotiations with Earth. You cannot negotiate separately with the humans, the Chancellor roared. The Council speaks for all member species. The Council has proven it cannot speak for itself, let alone for us, the Morthac replied. My people will survive this crisis with or without the Council's help. He left the hall, and his departure started a stampede. One by one, other delegates began walking out. They were all heading home to figure out how to contact Earth directly. By the end of the day, only half the delegates remained in the emergency session. The rest had given up on finding a council solution and were pursuing their own survival strategies. Junho watched it all with professional fascination and personal sadness. He had lived his entire adult life believing that different species could work together as equals. The Council had represented that dream of cooperation and peace. Now he was watching it die because of pride and stupidity. The Chancellor finally called an end to the emergency session. We will reconvene tomorrow to continue seeking solutions. But Junho knew there would be no solutions, at least not the kind the aliens wanted. They wanted humans to come back and fix everything without getting the respect and equality they had been denied. They wanted to return to the old system where humans did all the work while aliens made all the decisions. That was never going to happen. As the aliens filed out of the darkening hall, Junho remained in his seat. He opened a communication channel to Earth and began transmitting his report. Day 1 of the withdrawal is complete, he said into his recorder. The Council is already fragmenting. Conservative estimate, complete collapse within 6 months. The galaxy is learning what it means to live without humanity. So far, they do not like the lesson. Dr. Li Chanho stood in the center of the Earth Council chamber in Geneva, surrounded by holographic displays that showed the entire galaxy. The information floating in the air around him represented 30 years of careful study and planning. Today he would reveal the truth that would change humanity's place in the universe forever. President Im Yu-jin sat at the head of the curved table with the other leaders of Earth's government. She had been president for only 6 months, but the withdrawal crisis had aged her years in just a few weeks. Around her sat ministers, generals, and advisors, all waiting to hear what Chanho had discovered. Ladies and gentlemen, Chanho began, his voice calm despite the importance of what he was about to reveal. For 70 years, we believed we were the junior partners in galactic civilization. We thought the other species were more advanced, more intelligent, more capable than humanity. We were wrong. He touched a control, and the holographic display changed to show a complex web of connections. Lines of light connected Earth to thousands of other worlds with data flowing along each connection. This is the true structure of the Galactic Council, Chan-Ho continued. Every major species, every important world, every critical system depends on human knowledge, human technology, or human intervention for basic survival. President Im leaned forward in her chair. Show us the specifics. Chan-Ho nodded and zoomed in on one section of the display. The Vrex military, which claims to be the most advanced force in the galaxy. 93% of their weapon systems use components designed by human engineers. Their shields, their targeting computers, their faster-than-light engines, all based on human technology that they have never fully understood. Defense Minister Park Sang-ho whistled softly. They built their entire military around our designs? Not just built around them, Chan-Ho replied. They cannot function without them. When our people left, the Vrex fleet became 90% useless overnight. They can fly in straight lines and fire simple projectiles, but they cannot fight a real war. The display shifted to show trade routes crisscrossing the galaxy. The Zephyrian trade empire controls commerce across 40 star systems. But look, at this, every single trade route depends on human logistics. We designed their cargo containers, their scheduling systems, their security protocols. We even taught them how to calculate the most efficient paths between stars. Foreign Minister Kim Yoon-soo shook her head in amazement. They made us think they were the masters of galactic commerce. They are excellent at taking orders and following procedures, Chan-Ho agreed. But they never learned how to create those procedures themselves. Without human guidance, their entire trade network is collapsing into chaos. The next section of the display focused on medical systems. The Krathan medical establishment is considered the most advanced in the galaxy, but 80% of their treatments were developed by human doctors. Dr. Yoon Hai-jin alone created medicines that are used to treat 37 different alien diseases. What about their own medical knowledge? Asked Health Minister Lee So-young. Limited to their own species and a few closely related ones, Chan-Ho replied. They never learned how to develop treatments for other forms of life. They simply adopted human research and claimed it as their own improvement on our work. President Im was studying the display with growing amazement and anger. You are telling us that we were never the primitive junior partners? We were the keystone species, Chan-Ho said firmly. Remove a keystone from an arch and the entire structure collapses. That is exactly what is happening now. He changed the display to show real-time reports from across the galaxy. These are the situation updates we have received in the past 2 weeks. The Vrex are cannibalizing their own ships to keep their remaining fleet operational. Zephyrian colony worlds are experiencing food shortages because their supply chains have broken down. The Krathan medical system is overwhelmed with patients they cannot treat. Economic Minister Yoon Tae-jin was reading through data on his tablet. According to this, 17 species have already sent secret messages asking for direct negotiations with Earth. 23 as of this morning, Chan-Ho corrected. They are all desperate to restore human support, but they want to do it without admitting they were wrong about our importance. President Im stood up and walked to the holographic display. She reached out to touch one of the light connections and her hand passed through the projection. How did this happen? How did we become so central to galactic civilization without realizing it? Because we are very good at solving problems, Chan-Ho replied. When the Vrex had military difficulties, they came to us for help. We gave them better weapons. When the Zephyrians struggled with trade logistics, we showed them more efficient methods. When the Krathan faced medical crises, we shared our knowledge freely. And we never asked for anything in return, President Im said, understanding dawning in her voice. We asked for respect and equality, Chan-Ho corrected. They gave us neither. Instead, they convinced us that we should be grateful for the privilege of serving them. They made us believe that we were the primitive ones who needed their guidance to survive in the galaxy. Defense Minister Park stood up and began pacing. So we were actually in charge this entire time? Not in charge, Chan-Ho said carefully, but essential. The difference is important. We were never trying to control other species, we were trying to help them. but they became so dependent on our help that they cannot function without it. The communication officer at the back of the room cleared his throat. Sir, we are receiving another priority message from Ambassador Kang Dae-ho. The Council has officially requested negotiations. President Im smiled for the first time in weeks, but it was not a happy smile. What kind of negotiations? They want to discuss terms for humanity's return to Council service, the officer replied. Service? President Im's voice was sharp with anger. Not membership, not equality. Service. Chan-ho nodded grimly. They still do not understand. They think this is a temporary tantrum that they can solve by offering us small concessions. They believe they can convince us to go back to the old arrangement where we do all the work while they make all the decisions. What do we tell them? Asked Foreign Minister Kim. President. Im looked around the room at her advisors and ministers. These were the leaders of humanity, and for the first time in 70 years they understood their true strength. We tell them that humanity is willing to discuss a new relationship with the galactic community, she said slowly. But it will be a relationship between equals. We will not return to serving masters who do not respect us. Chan-ho touched his controls again, and the display changed to show a new set of connections. These ones showed Earth at the center, with lines reaching out to individual species rather than to the Council as a whole. This is my recommendation for our future relationship with the galaxy, he said. We establish direct agreements with each species separately. We share our knowledge and technology in exchange for fair payment and equal treatment. We help those who treat us with respect, and we ignore those who do not. What about the Galactic Council itself? Asked President Im. The Council as it existed is finished, Chan-ho replied. Half the member species have already left to pursue separate agreements with us. The rest are too busy dealing with internal crises to maintain any kind of central authority. Economic Minister Yoon was still reading through reports on his tablet. The financial projections are incredible. If we charge fair prices for our technology and services, Earth's economy will grow by 300% within 5 years. And if species refuse to pay fair prices? Asked Defense Minister Park. Chan-ho's smile was cold. Then they can try to survive without us. We have seen how well that works. President Im walked back to her seat at the head of the table. Very well. Dr. Lee, prepare detailed proposals for individual negotiations with each species. We will treat them fairly, but we will also make sure they understand that the age of free human service is over. She looked around the room at her advisors. For 70 years, we gave the galaxy our best efforts and asked for nothing but respect in return. They chose to treat us as servants instead of partners. Now they will learn the difference between cooperation and exploitation. Outside the windows of the Earth Council chamber, the sun was setting over Geneva. But for humanity, a new day was beginning. Ambassador Kang Dae-ho walked through the same metal doors he had walked through 6 months earlier. But everything was different now. The great hall of the Galactic Council was half empty. Many of the seats that had once held proud alien delegates now sat vacant, their species having withdrawn from the Council to deal with their own survival crises. The lights were dimmer than before. The human technicians who had maintained the power systems were gone, and the aliens had only managed to restore partial functionality. The air itself felt stale and desperate, like a dying building that no one knew how to repair. High Chancellor Vex's Tar sat coiled around the central platform, but his proud bearing had crumbled. His scales were dull, and his 4 eyes held a defeated expression that Dae-ho had never seen before. Around the hall, the remaining alien delegates looked like survivors of a great disaster, which they were. Ambassador Kang, the Chancellor began, his voice much quieter than it had been 6 months ago. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. Dae-ho nodded politely but did not smile. In his hand, he held a tablet containing the new treaty proposal that Dr. Lee Chan-ho had spent months preparing. The terms would revolutionize the relationship between humanity and the galaxy, but first the aliens had to accept them. The Council recognizes that we may have undervalued humanity's contributions to galactic civilization, the Chancellor continued. The words seemed to stick in his throat like poison. May have, Deho repeated calmly. Let me share some facts with you. Chancellor, in the 6 months since humanity withdrew from Council service, 37 species have either collapsed completely or lost more than half their technological capability. 46 worlds have experienced famine because their agricultural systems depended on human knowledge. Medical crises have killed over 2 billion beings who could have been saved with human treatments. The hall was silent except for the soft humming of failing electrical systems. 63% of the Council's member species have withdrawn from central authority to pursue direct negotiations with Earth, Deho continued. The remaining species control less than 20% of galactic commerce and have no functioning military coordination. The Zephyrian trade minister, her silver feathers now gray and lifeless, spoke in a broken voice. What do you want from us? Deho activated his tablet, and a holographic display appeared above the platform. Humanity is prepared to resume limited cooperation with the galactic community, under new terms. The display showed a document with hundreds of pages of detailed agreements. The aliens stared at it with a mixture of hope and fear. First, Deho began, humanity will establish its own sovereign space, equal in status to any council member. Human territory will be off limits to council authority, and Earth will make its own laws and decisions without interference. Several aliens began to object, but the Chancellor silenced them with a wave of his arm. They were in no position to make demands. Second, human representatives will have full voting rights in any council decisions that affect human interests. More importantly, humanity will have veto power over any actions that we consider harmful to galactic peace or our own security. The Krathan representative, his mandibles clicking nervously, spoke up. But that gives humans more power than any other species. Yes, it does, Deho agreed without apology. For 70 years, humanity provided more service to the galaxy than any other species, while having less voice in galactic decisions than anyone else. That imbalance ends now. Third, he continued, the old system of free human assistance is terminated immediately. Any species that wants access to human technology, medical knowledge, or engineering expertise will enter into bilateral trade agreements with Earth directly. Engineer Kim So-ra stepped forward from the human delegation. She had returned from Earth specifically to present the technical requirements of the new relationship. We have prepared detailed catalogs of every technology, every medical treatment, and every system that humanity has shared freely over the past 70 years, she announced. Species that want to continue using these innovations must pay licensing, fees, and provide fair compensation for human expertise. The Morthak delegates first stood up in anger. You cannot charge us for knowledge we already have. You have access to the results of that knowledge, Kim So-ra corrected. You do not have the understanding to maintain, improve, or repair the systems you have been using. If you want continued access to human technical support, you will pay for it like any other trade good. Dr. Yoon Hae-jin stepped forward to address the medical aspects of the new treaty. Human medical knowledge will be shared on a case-by-case basis, with full credit and compensation for our research. Species that want access to our treatments must also provide complete medical data about their own populations, so we can improve our understanding of galactic biology. The Quillarian delegate, his crystal body flickering with distressed colors, asked desperately, "What about emergency situations? Surely you will not let innocent beings die for lack of medical aid, humanitarian." Medical assistance will be provided in true emergencies, Hae-jin replied. But it will be provided by human medical teams, operating under human authority, with full recognition of Earth's role in saving lives. Captain Park Taemin presented the military aspects of the new order. The human defense fleet will resume limited peacekeeping operations, but only in systems where human interests are directly involved, or where governments have formal mutual defense treaties with Earth. We cannot protect every species in the galaxy for free while being denied basic respect, he continued. Species that want human military protection must offer something of value in return: technology sharing, trade privileges, or strategic resources. The Chancellor's 4 eyes were fixed on the treaty document hovering in the air above him. These terms are harsh. These terms are fair, Daeho corrected. For 70 years, the terms of our relationship were harsh on humanity. We gave everything and received nothing but contempt in return. Now we offer partnership instead of servitude, but partnership requires respect and compensation from both sides. The hegemony delegate, Ambassador Thekalon, who had been one of the few voices of reason during the crisis, stood up to speak. My government has already agreed to preliminary negotiations under these terms. We have found Earth's representatives to be fair but firm in their requirements. Several other delegates nodded in agreement. These were species that had moved quickly to establish direct relationships with humanity when the withdrawal began. We have learned that cooperation works better than exploitation, Theklon continued. The humans ask for fair payment and equal treatment. In return, they provide knowledge and assistance that has already saved millions of lives on our worlds. The HFY Chancellor looked around the half-empty hall at the faces of the aliens who remained. They were the survivors of the old order, but they were not the leaders of the new one. If the Council agrees to these terms, he asked slowly, what guarantee do we have that humanity will not abandon us again? Daeho's expression grew cold. You have the same guarantee that we had for 70 years. None. The difference is that now our relationship is based on mutual benefit rather than one-sided exploitation. As long as you treat humanity with respect and honor your agreements, we will honor ours. And if we refuse these terms, asked the Vrex military commander, then you continue trying to survive without human assistance, Daeho replied simply. How has that been working for you so far? The commander's scales flushed with embarrassment. The Vrex military had been reduced to scavenging parts from their HFY own ships to keep a handful of vessels operational. The vote was held immediately. Species after species accepted the new treaty terms, though many did so with obvious reluctance. They had no choice. The alternative was continued collapse and possible extinction. When the final vote was recorded, humanity had achieved what 70 years of loyal service had not: recognition as an equal partner in galactic civilization. As Daeho signed the treaty documents, he thought about how different things might have been if the Council had simply granted humanity the respect it had earned through decades of sacrifice. But perhaps this outcome was better. Now humanity would never again be taken for granted. The age of human subservience was over. The age of human leadership had begun. 1 year later, Bang Kyung-soo reopened his restaurant on Council Station. But now it was more than just a place to eat. It was the unofficial embassy where the new galactic order was negotiated over meals of kimchi and rice. The menu had changed too. Now it listed prices,